Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Before School podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and today we have an amazing guest, Yousef Awyan. He was my tour guide in Egypt, and it was probably the most incredible trip I've ever been on. He got us special access to all these sites that the public can't normally get to. And he's an expert in stonework and stonemasonry, and he's also a very accomplished musician, so he knows about frequencies and resonance and harmonics and all these things mixed together to give us a very unique perspective on what these stones mean, what these monuments mean, the symbolism, and possibly if they have a purpose or function. And so today we're going to dive deep into the myths and the legends about Egypt. And I felt that it was very important to get the perspective of somebody who lived in Egypt their whole life. And Yousef comes from a long line of people who lived at the base of the pyramid, literally. So his knowledge is very valuable to this subject and this investigation. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Yousef. Great to see you
Hello,
again.
Mark. Hey, good to see you, brother.
Yeah, I had an amazing trip with you in Egypt, and you were such an incredible tour guide. So I'm honored to be talking to you again.
Same here. The tours we do, especially with the Uncharted Access, like a lecture tour all over the area using the real monuments. So there's nothing like seeing these sites live and exploring around it. How's life been with you, brother?
Life is great, and I think about our Egypt trip probably every day,
Yeah,
and it seems like the whole world thinks about Egypt every day. It's always in the news. It's always, you go on social media and everybody's always talking about the pyramids or the Sphinx.
yeah,
And I've talked a lot about Egypt on my channels from different archaeologists and so-called experts, but I think it's great to talk to somebody like you who actually lives in Egypt, who studies this your whole life from many generations, who works with stones to get the firsthand perspective, of somebody that lives there. I think it's
yeah.
important.
Thank you. Really, yeah. I'm not the one who studied more, but I explored a lot all my life. I live near the Giza Plateau, and I lived there all my life, and I used to explore since I was a child in the area. So
So you've lived right by the pyramids your whole life.
yeah, you saw my house when you came. I was born in this house. It's like 30 meters or less from the entrance, and
Yeah, I remember going to your stone shop, and it's surreal because you're right there by the pyramids. You
yeah,
you like look at your front door and there it is, right in front of your step.
yes, and of course I must give credit to my father, God bless his soul, because he built the house, and he also was an Egyptologist and archaeologist as well. That uh, same, I am same like him. He, since a very young age, the area was his playground, and he studied in the university about archaeology and the ancient history, and then he passed a lot of the knowledge to us as
That's
well.
great.
Yeah,
Well, I'm so grateful that you're carrying on that torch, because so many of the people that I get my information about Egypt from, they use you as their source, like Ben from Uncharted
I
X or
am
Common
honored, of
Friend.
course. Yes.
Yeah,
And that's why I choose always to work with Ben from the Uncharted X, because we don't just want to get more clicks and more views and stuff. We want to investigate the informations before we pass it down to the people. This is a very important thing. Integrity, not just to be famous or to get more views or to have more tours. It's always good to have more tours, but we still have to, work with integrity.
yeah. So correct me if I get your intro wrong at all, but you are a stonemason. You're an expert in shaping and moving
I study
stones
stone
with.
masonry and I sculpt. I sculpt with hand tools, hammers and chisels and clappers, files, and I also work with power tools like Dremels and diamond tip tools and things like carbide tips and circular saws.
So when you're looking at the stonework of these megalithic sites, you can see what tools they used and what methods they used to move the stones and shape them, right?
You can realize that there are two different industries. It's not a secret because in a museum like the Imhotep Museum, for example, the archaeologists themselves are dividing the stone vessels to two partitions, to two sections. One of them is a lot older and more advanced in the machine, very, very unique. I know you know about the subject of the stone vessels, the dishes, the cups, and the vessels. All these designs were created from various types of stones. Most of it is igneous rocks. Some of it is metamorphic as well. Calcite, rose granite, slate, basalt, porphyry, milky quartz, rock crystal, clear quartz, amethyst, jasper, um, obsidian, even that obsidian is not from Egypt originally, and other types as well. Like on the other hand, we have the other section, and they call it the Imhotep production. Imhotep is the name of the ancient Egyptian Renaissance man, let's call him that. He had held many titles, astronomer and a musician and an engineer, and he is the one that built the step pyramid. They give him the credit of building the first large structure from stone in ancient Egypt, about 2700 BC, third dynasty. And the other section from the other types of stones is the pre-Imhotep industry. And then there is the Imhotep industry or craftsmanship. Let's call it industry because it is very, very huge. It's not just the stone vessels. The structures are reflecting the same thing. So, as we said, the academic themselves are dividing in that museum, it's in Saqqara, they are dividing the two industries. One that is older and it is more advanced and reflects the same power tools of what we call the lost technology, like the tubular drills and the saw cuts in hard rocks like those. And the other one is one type of stone, calcite, which is softer than the calcite is the famous Egyptian alabaster, of course. And just seeing that tells the story. There was that industry, and this industry was lost. And then these artifacts were being passed down. There is no doubt because they were found underneath the step pyramid with names scratched on the surface from previous kings. So there is no doubt that those are the king from the third dynasty, or Netriret is his original name, had these artifacts passed down to him. But there was another production which shows that the ancient Egyptians during that era, if the mainstream timeline is correct, which is about 2700 BC, they started a reproduction and manufactured the vessels from one type of stone using a famous drill that was used manually. It's basically built up from a long branch with a part of it that is capturing a piece of flint so that it would spin and do the carving and it had two weights to give the power while you are drilling, and of course a handle to rotate that drill. This was left in the scenes from the old kingdom tools, and this is the tool that the ancient Egyptians during that time, during the time of Amenhotep, used to produce the calcite vessels. Some of the calcite vessels goes back to the older industry as well, but I'm talking about the whole production from the time of Amenhotep was created just from one type of stone, which shows, of course, that they have chosen a beautiful stone, but it is softer and available as well. While the other types of stones are not located in one location. There is the diorite gneiss, also one of the types. There are two different types. Some of them is coming from Sudan. Some of them is coming from Egypt. And we have a lot of the different types of stones like porphyry and bercia and slate. These were brought from the eastern desert. So when we find these stone vessels in pre-dynastic barriers, so that industry is older than the pre-dynastic found, the one with the superior results. So we find it, archaeologists find it in the pre-dynastic barriers, and pre-dynastic Egypt is matching the Neolithic and the Chalcolithic periods, so the Stone Age and the Copper Stone Age. This era for the Egyptians reflects that their lifestyle was very primitive. Many questions. Who traveled and actually brought these stones before we even talk about how it was manufactured? Who brought the material from these different destinations? And why did they choose very hard rocks like these? Because the calcite can be or limestone. And what was the real use of it? It sounds like we are talking about the pyramids, right? Because they are actually connected together. The industry, the masonry of the pyramids, to me, looks more like the pre-Imhotep production in the accuracy and the precision, the types of stones, and the tools that was used also to create the stone vessels or the pyramids. And then I'm not taking any credit from the dynastic Egyptians after that. From 2700 BC, from the time of Imhotep, everything that the books say is very accurate about the industries of the dynastic Egyptians. The real mystery, in my opinion, lays in the pre-Imhotep era. So if we wanna think that the pre-dynastic Egyptians created these somehow, we find this very difficult because they were found side by side sometimes with pottery jars. These pottery jars were created by hand forming. So the pottery wheel was not invented yet. It was not reflected in the pottery production. It was very primitive, according to the official information. It was created by just making a pit in the ground and using a piece of wood or bone to shape it, and then they burned it on two phases. That's why it has part of it that is brown and the part of it that is dark black, and you can look at it. It's not perfectly symmetrical. It reflects that it was not created by a pottery wheel. I know this might be a bit boring, but it is actually these fine details that we look at in industries to separate the layers, which one came after. So there are these older stone vessels, the pre-Imhotep production, they are much more advanced. And if you want to follow more of this, of course, you can see the meteorology results that was done on some of them, been posting about them and about how it reaches the level of micro machining. It's a really superior machining. So there is no way except accepting that these were passed down to the pre-dynastic Egyptians. But by who? There was supposedly no evolution before that. Everything before that is supposed to be nothing more than hunter-gatherers through the Paleolithic era, through the Mesolithic, the oldest, the Stone Age, the Middle Stone Age, and the New Stone Age. So we have a mystery right there. The pyramids are reflecting the same superiority of the pre-Imhotep knowledge or industry or both. So when we visit the step pyramid, which is the achievement of Imhotep, the priest, according to the official records, you can look at it. It is built with random pieces of local limestone from the area. There is tons of mortar filling between these random blocks, and it does reflect, and also the stone structure around it reflects the capability of the dynastic Egyptian at that time. I have no doubt, especially when we study a previous structure. If you know about it, it is known as Shonit Zibib. It's all built from mud bricks, and it's still standing until today. It's in Abydos, this area. The design of the wall is matching the remaining walls of the enclosure of the step pyramid in Saqqara. So we can see here in one hand the evolution of the dynastic Egyptian and the stone masonry and the pre-stone masonry, of course, which is the mud brick with the mortar and the plaster that they used to finish the walls, which we can see it. And it was still being used also in the dynastic Egyptian time. They used a lot of mud bricks to build their houses and some of their things that they live, and also some of the stratification, archaeological stratification at the sites itself, like the way you can see some of the finishing around the third pyramid of Menkaure was also finished with mud bricks and plastering over the walls, which does not match, of course, the megalithic work of the pyramid itself. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, I really appreciate how you just laid out that timeline and how it kind of doesn't make sense to our modern minds, because we tend to think that everything just progresses in this like unbroken linear line, that everything just advances with time and that's kind of automatic. But what you're pointing out is that the older sites are better built, they use bigger stones, they have more precision, and there's this clear separation between these two industries. And we have pretty good answers for what happened with the more recent industry, but we don't have we've kind of lost the tools and the knowledge of how these older things were built.
Yeah. It's actually still try to build a pyramid today. It's not going to be easy.
So,
And
yeah,
very
I'm curious,
costly
like
as
what,
well.
Yousef,
Yeah.
like what do you think is the most compelling evidence of lost technology that you see?
This subject is not a mystery. It is mentioned in the books about industrial and machining in ancient Egypt. such as the most popular one for Alfred Lucas is one of the authors that studied and wrote a book about industrial and machine. And it's simply everything else from chiseling to polishing with the piece of rock, which is the mainstream answer. Like they use the piece of rock and sand to do the polishing, or they use the hammers and chisels. This was found also on the scenes on the walls when it showed how they sculpted or how they polished or how they transferred statues or blocks or stones or sarcophagus on a slide and things like that. Many of these things we took from the walls. We learned from what the ancient Egyptians left on the walls. But it doesn't answer everything. It doesn't answer, for example, the older stone vessels, which is, again, that's why I always say that the study of the pre-Imhotep stone vessels is very important because it is connected directly to the pyramid builders. It reflects the same superiority and in the results, which reflects, of course, the capability of the makers or the builders. So the tubular drills and the saw cuts in stones like basalt and the granite and white calcite. We found those just as tool marks on the surface of the stone, but there is no record of them on the walls like all the other industries that the dynastic Egyptians left, also including manufacturing the vessels. The manufacturing the vessels have scenes that still on the walls of the old kingdom tombs, and it shows the other tool that was invented that I was describing earlier, that was invented during the time of Imhotep, not the pre-Imhotep ones, because some of the pre-dynastic, or they call them archaic age, because the archaic age is the first and the second dynasty. They sometimes relate them to the archaic age because some of the names of the kings, like Hatshepsut and others, were found carved on the surface of these. I personally believe that these carvings could be added later by those who claimed these artifacts. So the tool marks were found just as tool marks on the surface of the stones. It was never found as a scene on the wall or as the tool itself. We found the clappers, we found the copper chisels, thousands. We found the farming tools from the old kingdom. We found the wooden slides. We found the boats. Sometimes canals and rivers were used in transportation. And there are scenes that were left from the dynastic Egyptian time, shows ships or big boats carrying heavy loads. And there were people also supporting the navigation from the shore. This scene is in the tomb of the twins in Saqqara, one of the rare scenes. It shows the ship sailing with the load on it, and the people are still helping navigation by dragging it with ropes from the shore. I believe this method could be very functional, especially if there are smaller canals that they can take their loads to transport it from one location to another. But we never saw a saw being used in cutting a stone. The old kingdom left us scenes of using a saw and also bow drill the bow drills, it was only for woodwork. They never showed it used for stone, only for woodwork. That's why it is considered a lost technology, because we only find it, it's found, the tubular drill marks are found in the stone vessels, and it's documented by Flinders Petrie, some of the pieces that is rock crystal and calcite, and he has a whole collection. He was very interested in the machinery, so he gathered a big collection, and sometimes is displayed in his museum in England. And but it's not in the production of Imhotep, because it was the piece of flint that is hanging horizontally, and very similar, very, very similar to the same style that they are using to produce the alabaster vases in the West Bank today to sell for the tourists. You remember these guys spinning, but they are using iron now. Back in the days, it was a piece of flint. So we know how this one was produced. In most cases, I would hear tour guides talking about that this is how everything was produced, and they are not separating the two different industries. The older one, the pre-Imhotep, I like to call it pre-Imhotep because it is what the academics used in the museum itself, because I respect the academics and their work. And I always advise my guests not to underestimate the capability of the dynastic Egyptians. Maybe you heard me saying that once or twice on the tour. Because many people would, even the scenes on the walls, or something like Dendera temple, or some of the amazing temples. Like you remember City the First temple in Abydos. We have no doubt. You remember that one where they have supposedly the helicopter and the submarine, and remember this one?
The submarine?
Yeah. There was a lintel in the wall that has some figures in hieroglyphs that some people said they look like a helicopter and a spaceship and
Yes.
stuff.
Now I
Yeah,
remember. Yes, there
and
were some
that
very
temple,
strange
for example,
drawings.
is amazing. It's really impressive. We know that the dynastic Egyptians built it and inscribed it. So from the Old Kingdom, look at the Old Kingdom tombs. All this fine art shows that the civilization is really old. But the older ones, they appear to be from a pre-symbolism era, before the symbolism was invented. So I would assume that there is another chapter in the history that is not written. That's where I would look at this and see that the artifacts were passed down, and a lot of the megalithic pyramids that reflects the loss of technology were from the same era. Whatever happened to the stone vessels happened to these megalithic structures, because they are reflecting the same creators with the same tools, with the same precision, and also being found in primitive burials. This is one of the best examples to show that we have a chapter in history that is not written yet. We have another relevant fact to this. At the quarry of Aswan, there are symbols painted on a surface of the granite. This surface clearly reflects that a megalithic block was extracted with the method also that is mysterious, that left a very fine straight surface, doesn't show any damage that happened to it. And me, my friends, archaeologists, um, inspectors that works in the Ministry of Antiquities, we looked at these symbols. They are painted in red ochre. They are showing ostriches and figures of human beings. These, everyone looked at it and said, this looks identical to the pre-dynastic symbols. Now, according to the official story, extracting the stone, the hard rocks like granite stone, from the mother rock, from the bedrock itself, didn't happen during the Old Kingdom. This is also mentioned in the Alfred Lucas book as well. And the majority believes that the granite stone was extracted from the bedrock from the Middle Kingdom time, about 2100 BC, according to the mainstream timelines. The Old Kingdom, or the pyramid builders, they are supposed to be from the 2700 BC until the end of the Old Kingdom. And then there was an intermediate period. We don't know exactly how long, and we don't know exactly how accurate these dates are, because the accurate dates, and this is the archaeology results, is from 1500 BC. You start to get very accurate dates. So from the New Kingdom time until today, we have much more accurate timelines. But before that, there is a foggy parts. Some carbon dating was showing older, and it require more investigation to get to more accurate timelines if we wanna know about the timelines of the buildings. So how can, back to the granite stone wall with the ancient symbols on it? I haven't seen, and I asked my friends, have you ever seen any of these symbols repeated in any of the tombs or any other temples that looks like that? No, we only see it in the pre-dynastic, the paintings on the pottery jars of these, they look like ostriches, and exactly the same. I will send you pictures. If you need pictures of these, I would send you pictures.
Great.
So how can these paintings be laid on a surface of something really megalithic that was extracted, probably a huge obelisk or something, and then we say that the obelisks or extracting from the bedrock only happened during the Middle Kingdom time? So how come these glyphs are on top of a surface, and these glyphs are much more ancient than what we estimate for when the ancient Egyptians started extracting stones from the mother rock? And the officials have another opinion, that, or it's not an opinion, I think it's just another story to tell about these paintings. For them, the only answer I held it was in a documentary. Do you remember the documentary we watched at the unfinished obelisk site?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. So in that documentary, they say that these are paintings created by the workers. And the reason we see these odd birds and animals, because they brought these workers from far away lands, and they did these paintings because they were homesick. You know, it reminds them with home. Because you see dolphins, you see ostriches, and the ostriches are, it doesn't take a lot of studies. You're going to find it only on the caves or on the pottery jars from the earliest of the Nagada. Nagada the first is one of the pre-dynastic civilizations. So we have that. These are things that should be investigated. Really, if we wanna learn more about it. How old is the civilization?
Yeah, I
Because we
found that
have
unfinished. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to mention that that unfinished obelisk was such an astonishing thing to see because they show you the video before you enter the site that shows them using very primitive methods
Mm,
to extract that stone that was over 1,000 tons. I mean, so massive.
yeah,
To think that they were using these very crude tools, it doesn't really make sense, right?
no, it doesn't make any sense. I remember we were there once on one of the tours with our teacher, Christopher Dunn. And you know Chris, he's an engineer,
I-
so he's
I've
not
heard
an
of them. Yes.
Egyptologist. We talked about the possibility. So this method is called by the academics extracting the stone by crushing it. So they believe that they crushed the granite stone with the pounders of dolorite, and no, it's not, of course, the pattern of the scoops around it shows a totally different technique. And I will use the word of Christian. It's a ridiculous theory. This is, and I respect his opinion as an engineer. So we do find more than one method of extracting at the unfinished obelisk site. The most famous one is the wedging technique with the wood wedges, and you carve in them. This is figured out. The other one is the mysterious one, the one supposedly done by pounding, even though some people wanted to believe because they found some fire around another attempt to extract um, a monolith. They assumed that the ancient Egyptians used the fire on the surface of the granite to make it crumble easily while they pound. And I respect the theory, but it is not functional. And the experiment that was done was not good enough to leave a pattern that is anywhere similar to the results of the ancients when they were extracting these megalithic blocks. So if you're going to do an experiment, it has to be convincing. It's not just to, say, yes, this is how it was done and everything was done primitively. No, the precision matters. It's an industry. So it has to be studied through people who practice the machining in stone.
Mm. So we have these massive 1,000-ton stones. What is the mainstream explanation of how those stones were moved?
Again, in Egyptology, we have unfinished work and we have the scenes on the wall. We have scenes, as I said, I'm not underestimating the capability of the dynastic Egyptians. Let's look at, but the 1,000 ton is another subject. But did the dynastic Egyptian had the capability of moving multi-ton stone? Yes, they did. And they showed us how they raised them using the ramp technique. And we have, for example, pieces that is 30 and 40 tons on the ceiling of Dendera, on the second floor, from sandstone. Yes, sandstone is softer, but the weight is the main challenge here. So we have pieces that is 40 tons and more on the ceiling of Dendera. And the ancient Egyptians were able to move those, even though the Temple of Dendera is in a much later era. We are talking the Greco-Roman period, about 300 BC. The other one still is thousands of years. Even if we are talking about the mainstream timelines, it's still more than 2,000 years earlier. 2,000 years. Just look at where we are now and where were we 2,000 years ago. So it's not a short time. So we have colossal statues that were moved. We have the wealth that we had through during the New Kingdom after the resistance of the invasion that was here, and we had a lot of wealth in Egypt that was behind achieving a lot of the things. Like, look at the treasures of King Tutankhamun, for example, and the statues. And so all these were a dynastic production. It's so clear. We have the Benbins, the Pyramidian stones. The Pyramidian stones, we studied the language on it. We studied the Midu Neter is the name of the language, which means the words of nature or the divine words, which is known as hieroglyphs. So the wisdom of the ancients was passed down. We can see clearly refers to the four cardinal directions on the pyramidions, on the Benbins in the Cairo at the Cairo Museum. One facing the east, one facing the northern constellation. One is talking about Osiris and the west, and one is talking about Ptah and the south. Ptah had a title, the one on the southern side of his work. So each side has a refer to one of the four cardinal directions, which shows that the dynastic Egyptians knew about aligning the pyramidion with the cardinal directions. And that's how the activation happens. This is how the pyramid power is generated, by aligning that biogeometrical design to the cardinal directions. A lot of the wisdom is passed down, there is no doubt. And there is also something interesting. When we study the pyramids, why did it change from a step into a straight line? There is always the answer that there was a change in the belief system from a stellar belief system to a solar belief system. Is it more to religion or science? This is another subject. But so there is a chapter that is mentioned by the academics when the civilization was more connected to the stars. Now, that's a chapter that what nobody talks about a lot. For how long and who observed the movement of stars? The answer is not convincing at all. So they said when humans started to live and stopped traveling, like they started to hunt, to saddle and cultivate and domesticate animals and live near the river, they were suddenly afraid of the skies and what's in it. So they invented stories to calm themselves down from this fear. I don't find this a really satisfying answer, especially if we know that before that, humans were traveling for very long destinations. And they showed like the pre-dynastic pottery vessels shows huge ships with oars. So they used to navigate. And this is one of the things when you talk about the older eras, and we want to imagine that the humans at the time were really naive and ignorant, just because it is pre-symbolism doesn't mean they didn't have the knowledge. And when symbolism started to appear, what do we have? We have one of the pre-dynastic artifacts that is known as the cosmic cow. So the cosmic cow is, I'm not an astronomer, but I see things and I have to trace it. There is knowledge about the cosmic cow. It is reflected on that palette. It is reflected on the palette of Na'armer, the one that says the first dynasty. There are these two creatures with the horns known as Bat. Bat is one of the earlier depictions of the cosmic cow. But there is even older one. It shows like a tree with horns and the stars. It was one of the first depictions of the cosmic cow. Also, the observing site of Naphtali. It showed the alignment of the stones. And it showed also big pieces of stones were carved to look like cows. Then this same belief, this same wisdom was passed down from the pre-dynastic time to the dynastic until we saw it. It's actually until today, but you can see it in the New Kingdom. It is very famous, the cosmic cow. It is the one that shows the king suckling from the cow underneath the cow. This is very, very famous. This is not just any cow. And this is not a tradition that happened when the Egyptians were barbarians, like, feeding from the cow directly in the wilderness or something like that. No, this is showing the wisdom that was passed down from the pre-symbolism time, how we are feeding on cosmic energy. One of the subjects that still needs a lot more investigation as well is the subject of the cosmic cow. Hathor, of course, she is the same one. And that same subject is connected with a very famous story that was passed down through the dynastic Egyptians as well, from very ancient times. It is connected to the annihilation of mankind. So it's as if somebody wants to give us that message, this wisdom, they want to pass it down so that we wouldn't forget. This is what I would imagine. So if you want to, of course, know more about the book of the cosmic cow, it's very known. It's written in the ancient Egyptian language, and it was translated. Which when the sun god became raged at mankind, and he sent this rage, and it almost killed everyone. And it's just a long story. It could be showing for us something like the solar burst that happened once. But it definitely reflects that the star knowledge for the ancient Egyptians is primordial since before what we call the historical times, because unfortunately we call the historical times from the time we invented a language, a written language, so that we could keep a written record. That's where when we call the beginning of history. That's of course needs to be reconsidered, in my opinion, because people live with wisdom and with knowledge, even if they don't write it down. And one of the best examples is that we still have on Earth some languages that are not written, but they've been spoken for thousands of years. Here in Egypt, for example, we have the Nubian language. It is a language, and they've been using it for God knows how many thousands of years, but it's not written down. So I believe we have investigation to be done in the pre-symbolism era, which is very hard, of course. But our best evidence are these artifacts that could be passed down or created from the pre-symbolism They reflect the same superiority. They are matching each other in a way. Stone vessels and the pyramids. Not all the pyramids, because we have pyramids. Like we entered one of the pyramids um, from the Middle Kingdom, the Black Pyramid in Dahshur. We created a private permission for that and we entered. Everything inside reflects the capability of the dynastic Egyptians. Mm. So it's so clear that the dynastic Egyptians built the pyramids. The step pyramid, there is, as I was saying, the steps and everything is built with a primitive stone masonry technique that reflects the capability of the dynastic Egyptians in the third dynasty. There is no doubt. But there is a mystery underneath the pyramid, not just the stone vessels. You remember we held with our hands many shards of white calcite pieces. More than 80 tons were brought from the galleries underneath the pyramid and the southern tomb, which is connected to the complex of Zoser as well. And they were much more advanced machine. They had saw cut marks, they had very flat surfaces, and they also had tubular drills in it. There used to be piles on the northern side of the step pyramid, but they covered them underneath the ground. They put the rubble from the restoration work on top of it, and they just bulldozed everything and they flattened the earth that area. On the side, we still find pieces, but it became very rare when we used to have piles like, oh, look at this one has a tubular drill, look at this one, this has a stoma. We used to just show them when we went there like that, and then suddenly I don't have the evidence anymore, except for some of the videos that Ben took, or Joanna James, or others, are some of our friends that were with us and they documented these. Now, if you talk, you would, like, if we didn't have these videos, they'll say, like, you're making up things. There is nothing here. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
thankfully on our tour, I was able to see a few of those tube drill holes and the saw marks. Very interesting. It led me down a rabbit hole of looking into how you would create those. I saw quite a few videos of people making these tube drill holes with very primitive tools. The rotating stone with the
yeah,
quartz at the bottom.
with the powder,
But
yeah.
then the big controversy is: are these tube drill holes, are the lines on them vertical or are they spiral? If it's a spiral, then it's a drill.
Yes.
I think that's the big controversy.
It's a very old debate. Flinders Petrie himself had that debate because he showed the groove of the striation was spiraling down, and they told him maybe just one piece of sand hanged into the copper tube and then did the spiral groove. Uh, why we didn't find the tube from copper? On the other hand, we found hundreds, if not thousands, of copper chisels. We cannot say like all of them faded away or worn out, because we also found the chisels. Why we didn't, the most important, why we didn't find a scene showing the manufacturing with a tubular drill, with the bow drill, or with the manual drill, or with anything. We didn't find, like, if the piece in the end of the manual drill was a tubular drill. Also, the stability with a big weight on the top, you won't be going down deep like that. Back in the days, there used to be a cylinder from basalt stone on the northern side of the so-called mortuary temple of the Middle Pyramid. They used to tie the camels in it. And one day I just approached it and I flipped that stone and I found in it a big and deep tubular drill, very precise. The edge on the surface of that, the piece itself of basalt was round, was a cylinder as well. And the tubular drill was perfectly in the middle of it. And usually, if you have the powder and you have this, if you're gonna go this deep, it's not gonna stay stable all the way. So you will have it loose, at least for a bit, so that you won't find that the higher circle on the top is perfectly circle. It will be like an oval shape a little bit because of the power of moving up. But today, for example, they need to stabilize the device to the wall before they use that tubular drill so they can make sure that it's not going to wobble while the process of cutting is happening. So, yeah, it is reflecting really very accurate and very, very crafty machining, not something random. And especially that it is very old. Imagine it was even before we have these results, before we find out about when the dynastic Egyptians created the pottery wheel. Like the pottery itself was done very primitively, while we already had these superior stone vessels produced. So I think this is very clear for those who wanna see the truth. So if they just wanna, argue, then yeah, the spiraling thing. It's been an argument that's is going since 1880s. So
Yeah. Well, speaking of debates, there was a recent discovery this year under the Khafre pyramid.
mm,
Uh, I'm sure you're aware that these scientists used this new type of radar, this synthetic aperture radar, mixed
yeah,
with the satellite technology to penetrate the ground and see what was underneath the Khafre pyramid. And what they claim to have found is these giant cylinders that go down 2 kilometers underneath the pyramid. I'd love to get your thoughts on what they found.
well, I just want you to know that I didn't want to give any comment about that subject until more investigation happens. And so, as a beginning, I will call it new data that is that should be investigated further. And I'm not going to call it a discovery because it's not discovered. Like we are just using these data from the radar to show that if you remember when we explored around the Giza Plateau, we went to the Osirian shaft, we went to some of the shafts behind the Sphinx, and going all the way to the middle pyramid. This area has more of these shafts, but these shafts are 30, 40 meters deep. I really find it hard to believe 2 kilometers. it's, it's very, it's very deep, but I cannot deny it or, um, agree to it. I would really stand just watching at that um, this new data that we have until further investigation happens to see. I personally believe, and this is what I share with my guests, that some of the underground tunnels can really be part of the pyramid in the primordial map, in the bedrock itself. So this is something that I believe myself. And we have the Osirian shaft that is uh, thought of as a symbolic tomb for Osiris. Symbolic. There is no symbolism even down there. There's nothing but a shaft and some stone boxes. And then burials took place during the 26th dynasty near them. They didn't even house the burials into the boxes, but they dug just little pieces on the ground that looks like a coffin or like the shape of the body, and they put the burials there. This is a reuse of something that was already there. And we have even a burial in the Valley Temple for one individual who buried himself in, So inheriting and repurposing some of the ancient structures is a historical fact, and it has many um, evidence that supports that. But I still find 2 kilometers is that's like, if the pyramid is about 150 meters, this is like what? How many pyramids below the pyramid?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So I like that
10
answer though.
pyramids will be 1.5 kilometers. Imagine. That's very huge depth. We know that the middle pyramid has much more megalithic stones. Like we have many of the blocks of limestone weighs 130 tons each and more. And there are parts on the foundation on the eastern side of the pyramid that is not natural bedrock, that is actually built from huge blocks of stones. But the story we know about this is that the very popular story to know about that is that it was used to level the plateau, not that it is covering. I am not against the idea that there is more of the structure in the bedrock underneath the pyramid. I am actually with the idea. But the depth of 2 kilometers, I find it really hard to believe. So this has to be done through the officials. So they need to go and they make tests on the ground around the pyramid, GPR tests and everything on the ground to get the results. And just for the people to know, the entire section that we enter in the pyramid of Khafra, or in the middle pyramid that is related to Khafra, is actually carved from the bedrock. It is not constructed until the focal chamber with the granite box. All the walls of this chamber is actually hacked in the bedrock. It is not built, except for the frame A ceiling. This is built from a different type of limestone. So my mind is open to the idea of finding the rest of the complex in the bedrock. Was actually pointing at some of the shafts and saying that these were repurposed during the site period of the 26th dynasty, and that they could be part of the original design of the pyramid itself, if it was not a tomb. This is the other part, the real purpose. And then they showed in the scanning not just the 2 kilometers. There is a layer of the frame A chambers, like the one above the focal chamber in the Great Pyramid, on the pyramid related to Cheops. So I think with a GPR test, these could be found, at least the one on the not the deepest level, the more shallower levels underneath the pyramid. If they want to prove themselves, like I see, of course, many people out there talking about it. They are even starting to name the groups or the tours for this year underneath the pyramid, so they can attract the audience and stuff like that. It's very interesting, and I cannot deny it or say that it's true. I find it harder to believe, honestly, because just 2 kilometers is very deep. To create a structure that deep has some challenges that I cannot even, mathematically figure it out, to create a structure 2 kilometers deep in the bedrock. Like, But I am
Yeah,
not
because
against the
at some point
idea.
you
Huh?
oh, so at some point you hit the water table, right? And
Yeah,
it's very hard to go if you hit water.
yeah.
How can
Now
you
you
go
hit the
deeper?
water after 30 meters,
Yeah, really.
2 kilometers. You're gonna hit the magma before.
Yeah. Huh.
Anyway,
Well,
it
I
require
appreciate that
it
answer.
require further investigation with collaborating with the officials and making this because it is very important. And I always be careful before I take something to the understanding of the complexity of the design because if it turned out that it's not, does that mean oh the pyramid was built with primitive tools and no we're gonna just drop everything that we've been investigating for our entire lives about how the pyramid is not created primitively in any way. So we gotta be careful in that part. Mm.
Yeah, I really appreciate your answer right there. It's easy for people to jump to a very sensational conclusion because that gets a lot of attention on the internet, especially.
Yeah.
You have all these people that go viral for saying, "Oh, it's an underground city," or "This is evidence that it's some sort of power plant." But, it's far too early to tell. But
Mm.
I like how you're open minded. We should keep exploring. Where I've heard some experts and archaeologists say, no, no, this is all fake. This is phony. We shouldn't even look underneath the pyramid. I feel like we shouldn't jump to conclusions, but we should absolutely look into this
Yeah,
100%.
definitely, yes. Like before that, actually, it's I don't know if this is all planned somehow or what, but before that, there was a famous YouTuber who came to the Giza Plateau and they claimed like everybody was talking about they discovered a whole city underneath the pyramid. These are new discoveries and stuff like that. It's gonna shake the world. Dr. Zahi is over there, and you know who I'm talking about? Mr.
Yeah, yeah.
Beast.
Oh, it was Mr. Beast.
It was Mr. Beast. And
Oh, okay.
you know, he was they were just showing the third chamber underneath the complex of Khafra and the Osirian shaft, the one that is full of water. Hmm? And
Hmm.
one of his assistants or friends was like, jumping into the water and trying to swim down there and stuff like that. And they are like, so the people, they don't know. So I told them, no, this has been discovered for ages. It's not a new discovery of anything. But Dr. Zahi was there and he was happy. He showed him around. The guy gave a lot of money, probably to the Ministry of Antiquities as a donation or something like that. And he made a huge video of how he spent 100 hours in the Giza Plateau. Hmm? And so that's not a discovery. This guy, he's just a YouTuber. He's not an archaeologist or anything. And he went out there and he said that he found a whole city under hmm, the Giza Plateau, and nobody said anything. They were just happy because he's a famous YouTuber, and this is good, advertising for Egypt. They absolutely welcomed him when he was saying that, and there is no real knowledge or real discovery or even good exploring with investigation. It's just like a person who have the money to do it and be like, oh, showing off and stuff like that. So I'm happy he had a good time. And I remember when I when I went in the waters of the Brazilian shaft, I almost went to jail because of that. It's like, what? Now he's jumping down there and having all the fun in the world. He's just being
I
welcomed
guess
as
if
it
you
is.
have enough money, you can do anything, right?
Yeah, that's what it
I wanted
appears
to
to
bring
be.
up one of the most incredible moments of the tour with you was the night we went into the Great Pyramid. and we went into the king's chamber, and we weren't allowed to take any pictures or photos or record anything. But there was that sarcophagus looking piece of stone in the middle
Yeah.
of that room, and you had me lay in it, and then you started to make that noise or the sound with your voice that made the resonance of the room. You know, you matched the frequency of the stones,
Yeah.
and it
The
seemed like the whole
resonance.
room changed,
Mm.
which made me think that the pyramids are not just some tomb. You know, maybe there's some purpose to the pyramids that we don't understand. Do you think that they had some greater purpose?
Oh, do you mean the granite box and the resonance inside it and the vibration?
Um,
I
yeah, or
have no
just
idea what
the.
you are talking about.
Oh, okay. We're not supposed to talk about that.
That's okay. Yeah, we're not supposed to. That's why we
Oh,
didn't
my
take any
bad.
photos.
I thought we were allowed to talk about it though.
Yeah, we can talk about it, but not that we did.
Yeah.
We can say maybe if you went there, it will be done.
Oh, so you can actually, I can cut this if we need to, but you can actually get in trouble if you just talk about going in there and making
If
noises
they,
and sounds or.
I'm not that important for the system, so they can. But if they want to sacrifice somebody, yeah,
Oh, so it's like that strict. I
I
didn't know that
actually
this was like
practiced
a.
this in the rock cut chambers in many places at the Giza Plateau. And I know about resonance. You know, I play music and I know about the tones. I play by heart. I didn't study music in the institute or anything. I just play by heart. And I actually once released a sound, and it resonated with one of the strings in the oud, the instrument that I love to play. And I kept playing with that tone. Oh, this is nice. This is fun. And then it was one day I was in one of the rock cut chambers in one of the barriers, and I was explaining about some things on the woods, and then I suddenly hit a note that resonated with the chamber and created that vibration like the one you felt inside the Great Pyramid. And so it became something that I wanted to find out more about. It was very interesting for me. And then I knew about resonance, and I had the honor of working also with the Resonance Foundation. And so I found a show that was popular in the 70s and in the 80s, was talking about an experiment or actually a study that happened on the Great Pyramid. And they said that this study says that the pyramid has that accurate space inside it, the interior design, like the Grand Gallery, and that it is actually resonating from the vibration of the soft movement of the tectonic plates. So the pyramid is harnessing or interacting with the vibration of Earth. We know we have a lot of to talk about when we talk about the power of design and how it is also absorbing the cosmic energy. This is also scientifically proven. But they also did that study back in the days, and it was in a show from the 80s. Talks about how the pyramid is harnessing and transforming frequencies that is generated from the soft movement of the tectonic plates. Like I still try to find the original study of this that was mentioned on that show, and I cannot find it. But just imagine that someone did that study long time ago. Like we were kids at the time. I was. So where are these kinds of studies? Why they didn't see the surface. This is the kind of study we are talking about. Also, the alien agenda. Excuse me to say agenda, but I really worry about it as well because it can have a lot of misinformation, especially when it comes to that we are not capable and it was aliens that created this. So I am more into the camp of lost era that used to have the knowledge and we have the production. Like all the production is from Earth, the stones, the design, the knowledge. Yes, it was a stellar knowledge, which shows that this stellar knowledge needed a long time to be built. And I'm not agreeing with the idea that all the knowledge about the stars is nothing more than a made up stories that was created, as they say, to calm themselves down from the fear of the unknown when they looked at the stars. It's not like it cannot be the first time they looked at the stars when they settled beside the river. They must have looked at the stars before that, especially if they traveled. If they traveled for long distances before mankind settles and build communities. So this is the other part of it. The Sphinx, the Sphinx itself. I remember you sent me that question about the Sphinx. Is it a line? Yes, it is definitely a line. A line with a human head. It's still a line, even though that we have the head smaller than the size of the body and could be recarved. But I studied with some of the archaeologists and inspector, and one of the older names that is mentioned in the book of Selim Hassan, the one who did the excavation around the Sphinx, he said that it is probably one of the oldest names of the Sphinx. And I find it very interesting. The name is Ruti. So the Sphinx had many names. Sphinx is itself is coming from the ancient Egyptian words Siship Ankh. And we have Hurim Akhet. Hurim Akhet is like the one facing the horizon. So Horus, Hur is coming from Horus, and Horus is representing the face of heaven. So I believe Horus is coming from the stellar knowledge, has very, very old roots from the pre-dynastic time. And the Ruti is the two lines, Shu and the Tifnu. They are the ones that came from or created by Atom and the wisdom of creation from that was passed down through Un, or the city of the sun. And the Professor Jaber, who is my teacher in hieroglyphs, he said that root is a word that means also gate, a gate. So the lions and the gate. You know about the lion's gate?
No.
No? The lion's gate originally is the alignment, the greater cycle. The great cycle is like the 26,000 year cycle.
Oh, the processional cycle.
Yes.
Yes, and
This is
we were in the age of Leo, and people speculate that is when the Sphinx was actually created, much older than we think, because that
nobody
was the
really knows how
constellation.
old the Sphinx is. And this is what the
Really?
Professor Salim Hassan says in his book himself. We don't know when it was created. We don't know if it was actually created by Khafra. This is not for sure. And of course, we have the work of Schwaller de Lubis that was followed by the work of John Anthony West, that was followed, of course, by the work of our teacher as well, Robert Chuck, the geologist, when he did the study of the Sphinx enclosure and did a survey and found out that the age of the Sphinx and the Sphinx enclosure geologically is much older, about 11,700 years old, at least, because of the deterioration or the erosion that happened by the water from that era. And it stopped at 11,700 years ago. So it can only be older than that. Maybe the ancients wanted to tell us about the cycle, and it is inevitable. And it will happen again. A lot of this knowledge, I see myself, this is my personal opinion, that is passed down from the stellar knowledge of the pre-symbolism era in ancient Egypt. And it was passed down just like the story of the cosmic cow. It was passed down in the what we know as the pyramid text. And it was also recreated in the New Kingdom as the Shatem Sibau, the one they call it the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Gates, or Coming Out to the Day. They are talking about the cycles as well. And you can see that the focus became much more on a smaller cycle, like the sun cycle. But there is no doubt that a lot of the wisdom from the stellar knowledge was passed down with many other stories, and it took many forms. We have the acre. The acre is also the two lines as well. And they simply represent yesterday and the day after. In my opinion, they are representing yesterday is the day before the end of the previous cycle, and the day after is the beginning of the newer cycle. This is my opinion. And that the civilization witnessed more than one great year. This is, in my opinion, how old the civilization can be. And based on many things, but a lot of these things are not going to be taken seriously by the academics, because they simply cannot find it written down clearly somewhere, like this was the date when everything, but it was written. It is, let's put in mind that it was happening, these events were happening in the pre-symbolism, and it was passed down as an oral tradition until it reached the language, until it reached the symbolism. And then if you had that knowledge and you want to make it more simple to put it into symbolism, that's how you're going to try to put things like the example of biochemistry, for example, the lotus flower coming from the dark waters, and then its interaction with the scarab beetle and the biochemistry exchange that happens between both of them. How can this be something from nature that they just wanted to bring the most simple example to teach us about how life came to be by biochemistry exchange. They just needed to give us examples from nature They wanted to put the knowledge or the wisdom into symbolism. And then along the way, that same symbolism became used for political power promotions. that's that's where things got really chaotic, because even from the normal palette, and this is my opinion, it was already political promotion. Not that he really unified Upper and Lower Egypt for the first time or something like that. Everything was already there. The jobs were there, the official things were there. And according to some of the official studies, the language was created in order to complete the official system of the government. So it's not the most advanced thing as we are looking at. It is actually the final step of creating a government or an official system with the jobs and the government and the police and the judges and the everything as we still know it today. This cannot be the beginning. It's the beginning of the system, but not the beginning of the civilization. So the symbols used just to show off in a way that I am the one who has the wisdom of the ancients. And this became a way, this became more like the religion. This is the sacredness, this wisdom and this knowledge. So at the time, which we call the First Dynasty, this was already serving as religious political powers. And the names of the deities were divided into something like the political parties, very, very close to. This is the priesthood of Ra, Atom Ra, and this is the priesthood of Amun. And there used to be a political battle happening from the beginning of documentation between these two. And we have some of its results in the New Kingdom as well. So it was happening from the oldest of time, and we have it like Akhenaten was trained in the camp of the Atom Ra of Heliopolis. He turned against the Amun Ra. Also, the priesthood of Amun, they were not the best. They were also manipulating, and they were taking all the wisdoms that was passed down about other knitters, and they tried to fit the story that it would be Amun, not the others. And this is how a lot of the information or the wisdom was changed, because they just wanted to relate it to them, to their own party, a religious political party. We cannot dismiss that, because this really created a lot of chaos. And I can see it a lot when my friends, the Egyptologists, they try to study it and they want to understand everything with the holiness and the wisdom of the depths of the religious belief of the ancient Egyptians, and not noticing that this is created as a political support from the temple to the ruler. So the system is very, very old, and the wisdom is older. What we can see is, what I can see, and this is my opinion, is that as same as the artifacts were passed down from that era, from that area that they were creating things with this superiority, the wisdom itself was also passed down. And we can find it without a doubt depicted if we can understand where the roots of it is coming. And the interesting part, the roots are coming from pre-symbolism. So the wisdom was alive for a very long time. Now, the reproduction of Imhotep reflects, of course, that there was a long intermediate period when this was lost. the capability, the wisdom can be passed down, maybe just as an oral tradition. And then the civilization became capable once again of reproducing stone structures and stone vessels, which is what we call the beginning. What we think is the beginning, in my opinion, it is not the beginning. There is an older beginning, and there is also a loss. There is also an intermediate period at some point. I believe I could imagine it would be near the Middle Stone Age. This was when humans started to live on a survival mode for a very long time after a cataclysm, or simply the Lion's Gate cycle was happening, which will happen again according to the geologists and to the astronomers. There is no doubt.
I like what you're saying there, and I wonder if that's just human nature, because I feel like we see that everywhere where something really good and sacred is discovered or passed down, and then people want to distort it for their own agenda. You know, they want to put their name on something great to take credit for that, so people will think that they're powerful or they're great, even if they didn't actually build it.
Yes, very, very, very common. Human nature on one hand, and as we say, when we look at everything, history repeats itself. One of the best methods that I like and I see clearly at the sites is the archaeological stratification. All the layers of those who inherited and lived at the site. The best part that it's still happening until today. We inherited. We are trying to benefit from it. We claimed it. We even took the pieces and put numbers on them. These numbers on the stone vessels, like there is one in the Grand Egyptian Museum, it has a name from the old kingdom, and it has a number from the old museum, and a number from the modern museum. So it's like history is repeating itself. Every claimer is trying to put, this is mine. And instead of the name, now they cannot put my name. I just put um, the number of the, what do you call it? Inventory, you know. So it is happening. And other things. I will tell you about the most famous story, for example. The most famous story, which I think it also puts some of the idea of also the day before and the day after. This is how the ancients called the day before and the day after can be also somehow put into the story of death and life. So you can find the same thing in the story of Osiris and Set and the Horus. Osiris is the day before. Set is the symbol of the storm that came and ended that day. And then Horus is the next day, is the new era. Horus is always a representation of the movement, of the course of the planets and stars on the sky. He's the face of heaven. It's not just a story. There is wisdom behind the story. So the oldest story was coded into the battle between good and evil, between Horus and Set. Horus was represented as the good, of course, and the Set, Satan, Set is the evil. But you see, the ancient Egyptians gave us a story with a location. Ger Aha is the name of it. It's now in Old Cairo, Coptic Cairo. The same location is in Coptic Cairo. And it's not hard to find this. This is one of the most popular stories that was passed down because it's the story of good and evil. So it kept being passed down from the pre-symbolism because all the stories, this is known to the academics, Osiris and Horus, and all these stories were already there pre-symbolism and the pre-dynastic. They were not invented during the dynastic Egyptian time. No, we actually don't know the roots of most of it. But anyway, the battle between Horus and Set, Horus was represented as the warrior with the spear, and Set was represented as the evil. In some cases, it was represented as a crocodile and as a snake. Until the Greco-Roman period, you find the image of Horus on a horse, stabbing the snake or the crocodile underneath the horse, which later became in Christianity Saint George, killing the beast. You know this iconic scene of Saint George?
I don't.
No? So
I should know this.
you can look it up. It's very famous. I can also send you pictures of it, but you can find it online. Just so Saint George is known here as Mary Georges. George. It is both, huh? And Mary means the beloved, and he is titled as the Roman champion or something like that. Anyway, just to see how the stories are passed down, the church of Mary Georges is in exactly the same location of Gher Aha, where Horus and Set had this iconic scene of him killing the beast. The same location, but with different names. Saint George is killing the beast on the same location with the same story between the good and evil. So that's how powerful these ancient stories can survive. And there are many other stories that survived like that. Talks about the cataclysm passed down through the Egyptian church, but the academics doesn't want to take it for a true story that can teach us something about the past. So the stories are out there, the oral tradition is out there, and the best evidence for it is that truly I really understand or understood the wisdom that says history repeats itself, because the same things is happening. But we're still debating in many cases with academics. And for academics, they want solid evidence. There is solid evidence in many cases. Like we showed many things in geology, like the one Dr. Robert Schoch investigated. And there is more. I shared with Ben a video about the collapsing stones of the so-called mortuary temple of Khafra, that they were falling from the effect of weathering. These are colossal pieces. The one is as big as a bus. Imagine these blocks will be deteriorating and weathering until they collapse. Other stones and different stone masonry in the same area from the Old Kingdom, and it is not reflecting the same amount of weathering, unless these megalithic ones were much older. That is so clear. When I shared this information with Ben and we published it in one of his videos, I have had friends coming to me, and some of them were officials, and they asked me to go and show them that, because they felt that this is like, this is something that should not be dismissed. And there is more than that. Of course, I took it, even it was so hot, but I did what I have to do, because I wanted the investigation to be carried further, and I wanted the awareness to spread. There is another thing. There is, and now this is in stonemason. There are remnants of buildings that was created according to all the information I gathered on the first dynasty, about 2500 BC. Supposedly the timeline of the builders of the pyramid. The stone masonry of these remaining structures on top of the structure are still there in different spots. And they are built from a different type of limestone, not like the ones used in the casing, or not like, of course, the neomelite one, the one that's used in the inner courses. Different. It's a different type of limestone, different size of the blocks, looking more like the Imhotep capability. Smaller sized blocks that can be carried by 10 or 10 people would be able to carry the one. And there was a whole building of it at the causeway of the middle pyramid and at the mortuary and behind the middle pyramid, and also a whole wall that surrounded the middle pyramid complex at once. They are from a much softer type of limestone that you can scratch with your nail like that. And these blocks were exposed from the day they were built. Yet, it's not nearly deteriorated or eroded or withered anything close to the much more solid megalithic blocks at the rest of the structure. I believe if we could also focus on that subject, it will reveal that there is a layer built on top of an older layer, just like we were saying there are many layers built on top of that from the old kingdom until today, not until the Greco-Roman period. Until today, we are still building as well. We are still putting things. We are still putting stone. So this is one of the subjects that should have more also investigation, similar to the one that was done by the scanning of the satellite.
Yeah, this is something I'm so interested in. The idea that a major cataclysm came, like a flood or a comet came down. And I think there is a lot of evidence that these massive catastrophes happen a lot more often than we had thought.
Yeah,
And I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think that during the, well, I think you're kind of hinting at it, but during the Egyptian period, was there a cataclysm that maybe hit and possibly separated this older period from the newer period?
yeah, that's what I believe. I believe there is a long era of survival just to survive. That's when everything became lost. And then everything else that we study from the Neolithic to the Chalcolithic to, it can go also to the Mesolithic. And this is what I could see very clearly when we were exploring in Turkey. The T-shaped pillars were repurposed in the buildings. So when we go see these stone circles, we can see that the settlers, so they dated to about 11,500 years. And what they dated to 11,500 years in Turkey was already the reuse of some people who were repurposing the site for their own living. And the clearest evidence is that some of the T pillar shapes were broken into smaller pieces and reused in the building. They were already recycling the material that was already at the site. And also, some of them were not in their original location because it shows that some gathered some of the smaller pieces and they wanted to make the circle on the same height for all of them. So they start to build with smaller blocks underneath them to put the shorter ones, and they become with the same height as the other ones that's still in the original location around them. So it shows that those who live at sites like uh, Göbekli Tepe and the Karahan Tepe and all these areas there in Turkey, it shows that the timeline of 11,500, which is about the Mesolithic era, the Middle Stone Age, these were not the original builders as well. These were the survivors, those who lived and settled in the ancient sites just to survive. So from that time, about 11,500 years until today, yes, we have this right. But it looks like that advanced era was before that. That's just my opinion based on the things I explored and saw with my own eyes. It's not harder to find many of the lithics, the arrowheads and stuff from, and then also find, because of course the rivers are very important elements for these civilizations to rise, like the river Nile and the Euphrates, and this is where the people will live around the river because there is a good source of life. You could find over there, you know what a cylinder seal is?
A cylinder seal?
Yeah, a cylinder seal is
No,
held
no.
by officials, those who were responsible about storing goods. Like imagine we are officials. I will be the one who come and check what you have in storage, and you are the one responsible about storage. So after I finish inventory, I will seal the storage rooms or jars or whatever, and put a layer of mud and run a cylinder seal on it to make sure if somebody broke into the goods that I will see that the seal is broken. It is very similar to the one they do with wax at the crime scenes. You know this one?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So imagine there are cylinder seals found in Egypt and in Turkey that is older than 6,000 years old. That means there was a whole official system 6,000 years ago. They didn't complete the language written, but they already had an official system. So the living on a survival mode probably happened in the last 12,000 years, within the last 12,000 years. So I will assume then that the cataclysm was before that. The other
So they
thing,
found these.
the cycles are
sorry.
important, but it requires further studies. I think we overwhelmed your audience by now. We're gonna overwhelm. It's lots. There is lots.
Well, you just mentioned the cylinder seals, which caught my curiosity. So they found these cylinder seals that are over 6,000 years old, and were they broken, or were they unbroken still?
No,
Or
they found the seals themselves that were held like in a necklace. So that means these were official
Yes.
6,000 years
Yes.
ago and more.
I see. Okay, so they had this official system.
Yeah,
Of
in
storing
the era we
things and
think they
keeping
were
them
just
safe.
still
Yeah.
very, very primitive, and no, there were officials at that time.
Right.
If we didn't have writings, that's something else, man. There was a civilization. and they were really civilized, and they really had, they knew how to run things. There was medicine, there was astronomy, there was all this could be some of the wisdom that was passed down. Not the official system. I think the official system was created later. But yeah, there are wisdoms that we cannot really know when it was known. But as I told you, some of the academics assume that it was pure imagination of the people that lived. I will tell you one more example. There is a goddess in the story of creation. Her name is Neat. Neat was still, the symbol was still alive until the dynastic Egyptians, and she was the one that does knitting. Okay? Knitting. Very, very, you see that the word itself was coming from the word neat. Her title, of course, in the dynastic times, they used Neat as a guardian goddess. This is all the story of the priest and how they gonna create an amulet for you from Neat to protect you, and then they get something from you. That's another subject. But the older text about Neat was creation. She was considered the one that lived before life. What does that mean? The one that lived before life. So the ancient Egyptian creation story believed that everything came from the primordial waters. Now, that doesn't sound like a myth. It sounds more like the scientific studies we did today about the primordial soup. You know about the primordial soup? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is Neat? Neat in the primordial waters is the living particles. And it is what was weaved together to give the shape or the life forms afterwards. That's why she had the title, the one that lived before life. Does that sound like something that was made up by someone who has no knowledge and just trying to make stories up? Or it sounds like a real wisdom, a real knowledge passed down from someone who knew really about that life existed in the waters and that single cell creatures got combined together and created life forms. This is like very close to the scientific studies that we have today, and we believe it as science, not as a myth. So there is a lot of that. A lot of the what's so-called Egyptian mythology, I like to call it the wisdom of the ancients because of that. Because it's more like wisdom. But then we have to put in mind this wisdom was in the pre-symbolism, passed down, and then misused by those who are in power, those who want to claim that the knowledge is mine and the power is mine. But still, when we investigate it further, we find out that it is actually science, closer to science, more than myth. Myth is like myth. It's not. It's nothing real. It's just a made-up story with fantasy. So, not
Yeah, I find this
yeah,
this study into mythology to be so interesting because modern science tends to dismiss all these myths as a superstition,
yeah,
you know. But I just had George Howard on my podcast and Graham Hancock, and they both really take myths very seriously. And George Howard even has gone around the world studying Bible myths, Bible stories, and seeing if there's any real archaeology that can be done. And he's found that some of these stories, like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, lines up with a meteor or a comet impact at that exact location. at around 1500 BC.
Mhm.
So that discovery got a lot of controversy, but it got a lot of attention from scientists and religious people because it it kind of opened the door to these stories are real, you know?
Yes, I agree. And but of course, also scientifically, they don't use the religious books to approve something. But if we just took it as a kind of an oral tradition that is passed down through the religious books, they still all talked about the floods, Noah and the flood. Everyone knows this story. So, yeah,
Right. And you're going to the Cosmic Summit next week, right?
unfortunately, no.
Oh
I
no.
couldn't get the visa with everything
Oh
happening in the
wow.
States. They really made it difficult. So,
That's unfortunate.
yeah, yeah.
Huh.
I really wanted to
Yeah.
go, and the guys were preparing lots of things. George was preparing, and the Serpent Brothers and Ben and many friends were actually waiting for me, and I was expecting to go and then explore after the Cosmic Summit as well. But they
That's
don't
too
make it
bad.
easy.
Yeah.
We are the
No.
terrorists of the Middle East.
The Egyptians? No, everybody loves Egyptians.
Yeah, tell that to the embassy.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
maybe I'll have to call some of my friends and see what I can do.
thank you, brother.
But
Let's wait
yeah,
until the protest about migration stops.
yeah. I don't know if that's going to help your cause to get to America or not.
No, you have to apply 3 months in ahead, and then you have to give like a lot of official people. And we did it actually. We did. I did all the
Hmm.
official bank statements and all this kind of stuff. But unfortunately, and I had been helping me signing up for the visa. And then when I came here, no answer at all. So I talked to the guys talked to me and gave me a phone number, said call the embassy. And then when I called the embassy and I told them, and I have a confirmation number for the signing up for the visa, but they said you didn't sign up through this website. Your friend signed up through that other website. So you're actually not listed in the waiting list for the visas at all. Like
Jeez.
he signed up, like we sit together and he wrote, it's like it's a lot of paperwork, and like I paid money applying for the visa, but didn't work. There is no, my name is not actually in the list at all. And
Oh, I'm
it's all
sorry to
right.
hear that. Well, hopefully next year. Have you been to America
Hopefully,
before?
no, I haven't been to the
Hmm.
United States, but we are preparing a tour to South America this year, inshallah, with Ben and the Serpent Brothers. So
I have to go on that one. Is that to Easter
you got
Island?
it. Huh? Actually, yeah,
Uh,
this is gonna be in
I,
October. It's gonna be in October.
Easter Island, right?
No, not Eastern Island. Peru and Bolivia.
Okay. I still need to go on that tour with you guys
Yeah,
I've
will
never
be
been to
good
South
to, of
America.
course, have you with us.
Yeah, you got a fun job. You get to go around the world and just look at amazing
Thank you.
sites and yeah, and you get to
I'm
hang out with a lot
definitely, of
of
course,
amazing
blessed
people.
and unfortunate to be traveling with my friends and actually been announced it not publicly. So he always liked to announce it to the Telegram groups and like his own friends, people who traveled with him from before, and the tour was filled before he even goes publicly. So he
Wow,
created another one. So we're gonna do actually two back-to-back tours in South America, inshallah.
that's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see all these amazing people going on the tours too, like famous fighters, celebrities, athletes,
yeah,
George St. Pierre, YouTubers,
yeah.
Mike Tyson. So I always see you in pictures with people that I follow on social media, and I'm like, oh, there's Yousef again. Yeah,
I'm just fortunate.
I think you're on a picture with George St. Pierre, who's like
Yeah,
one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, and he posts a picture on his social media, and I see you in the picture, and I'm like, there's my friend.
yeah. The YouTube's makes me famous But it was with him when I was working with him at the Giza Plateau. People were stuff like, "Hey, you're GSP. Ah, that's the guy." He's very cool. He's very cool.
Yeah, I think he's probably the greatest fighter ever.
And his mind is
One of
open
the-
also to understanding a lot of the mysteries as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, well,
I was
Yousef,
honored
this has
also to
been
give him that tour, of course.
yes. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I've learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes, and I'm going to look deeper into this stuff. And I really hope that we cross paths again.
Inshallah, I will be looking forward to see you in South America, inshallah. We will have lots of fun.
Yes,
Yeah. And
yes.
especially that
Hopefully,
we toured together here in Egypt, and then we can do the comparison between Egypt and Peru. Very similar. When I was there the first time, this is, inshallah, going to be my third time if I made it this year to Peru. And from the first time, I could easily see the similarity, and it's not as confusing as Egypt. There is more confirming about the two periods, the two production, the two industries over there, because there was no dynastic Egyptians in the middle that created amazing things that became more confusing to separate the layers. There is the megalithic, and then there is the Inca work, which is very humble in comparison to. So it's not really hard to, separate the layers of the two industries over there.
yeah, I've seen the pictures, and it's so obvious. You have these like giant stones that are perfectly fit together, and then you
Yeah.
have a layer of stones that are maybe 1/100th that size, and then you have small little bricks on top. So
Yeah.
it's like the
Coracantcha
layers are
is
very
one of
obvious.
the places I want to go to also. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Yousef, this has been a great conversation.
Thank you,
and
Mark. Thank you for having
I'm
me.
excited to run into you again.
Yes.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.